Good morning, everyone. So good to see you. You know, it's a genuine pleasure to see so many of my friends and colleagues in this room. And I also want to welcome the sizable group that's joining online and thank all of you for being here. The conversation we're about to have this morning impacts every one of us who lives, who works, and studies here in Massachusetts. And everyone who is helping to write the next chapter of our state's history. The report we will hear about today is a collaboration between Boston Indicators and the Mass Inc. Policy Center. It's entitled An Uncertain Future, How the Immigration Crackdown Threatens Massachusetts Labor Force. And yet, while the future may be uncertain, there's absolutely nothing uncertain about the vital contributions that immigrants make each and every day and have made to Massachusetts. Immigrants are essential to the economic, the cultural, and civic life of this Commonwealth. The report, however, drives home that we are at a very precarious moment. The immigration crackdown is not unfolding in isolation. It's a compounding with other federal actions, from cuts to research funding to reductions in the social safety net, each of which places additional stress on the people, the institutions, and the industries that make the Commonwealth what it is today. And be assured that these stakes are not abstract. They are immediate, they are local, and they belong to all of us. And consider, if you will, a few more facts that too often get lost in the noise and the heat of the current moment. Nearly 1 in 5 Massachusetts residents is foreign-born. I'm going to repeat that. Nearly 1 in 5 Massachusetts residents is foreign-born. Yet immigrants account for 27% of our entrepreneurs and 40% of our Main Street business owners. And drive down almost any main street in Massachusetts, in our Boston neighborhoods, in our suburban towns, in our gateway cities, and our smaller communities in between, and the odds are very good that one or more of the businesses that you will pass would simply not exist were it not for an immigrant who had the courage, the imagination, the audacity to build something here. And what is true on Main Street is true across our economy. From the research laboratories and universities that drive our innovation, to the hospitals and nursing homes that care for our parents and friends and our loved ones, to the construction sites where the next generation of housing is being built. Immigrants help power every corner of the Massachusetts economy. Without immigrants, the population of Greater Boston would have declined by roughly 100,000 people over the last 10 years. Instead, because immigrants chose to build their lives here, to raise their families here, to plant their hopes here, our region grew by 300,000. And that is the story of our region. And that is the story of our future. And last, immigrants in Massachusetts paid $20 billion in federal, state, and local taxes. And behind every one of those numbers is a neighbor, our neighbor. There are taxpayers and workers, caretakers, entrepreneurs, parishioners, and parents and students and business owners, our fellow Bostonians and fellow Bay Staters who are building the future of the state in concert with the rest of us. The Boston Foundation has stood with immigrants and organizations that served them from the very beginning of this organization, which was founded in 1915. From our earliest grants helping immigrant families build their lives after the First World War to the work that we are doing in this room today, our efforts have been guided by a truth that is simple but also profound. Immigrants have been and continue to be essential to the vitality, the prosperity, and the very soul of our Boston and beyond. And that history is why earlier this year we launched the Meeting the Moment, Supporting Our Immigrant Neighbors, a 3-part commitment to protect immigrants facing immediate threats, to provide flexible and unrestricted resources to organizations on the front lines serving them. and to advance truth-telling through data and through storytelling at a moment when misinformation and outright falsehood have been permitted to crowd out far too much of our public conversation. And last month, we distributed $1 million in grants to 10 immigrant-serving nonprofits across Greater Boston, organizations doing extraordinary work in legal aid and community organizing, in direct services, and in advocacy. And since the beginning of this year, the donors of the Boston Foundation have directed more than $2.5 million from their donor advised funds to organizations aligned with this work. That, my friend, is generosity meeting the moment. Boston has always been a city shaped by immigrants, and when our immigrant neighbors are threatened or vulnerable, we should not stand aside. We should not be silent. We step forward. They are us, and we are them. And that conviction is why we've gathered here today. This morning's conversation about the economic future of Massachusetts, about who belongs, who gets to belong, about what kind of Commonwealth we wish to become, is, I believe, among the most important conversations we can have and should be having at this moment in our history. It's a conversation that runs from Boston to our gateway cities, where so many new arrivals are putting down roots and where increasingly the foundation of our state's future labor force is being laid. In hosting this conversation here today at the foundation, I'm told it's my last public forum as my tenure as president and CEO of this wonderful institution, is representative of the work that we've been entrusted to do in partnership with each other. As I said, as the leader of this remarkable institution called the Boston Foundation. We'll begin this morning with a data presentation from two principal authors of the report, Kimberly Gullart of Boston Indicators and Ben Foreman of Mass Inc. And my dear friend Eva Bologna will then lead a conversation with Tom Bryan and Tara Gregorio. And we will, of course, leave ample time for your questions and for your reflections, and of course for your wisdom and good advice. So thank you all for being here this morning. It's good to see so many of you in the room today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So thank you very much for being here. I am going to present the first part of our report today, An Uncertain Future, How the Immigration Crackdown Threatens Massachusetts Labor Force, and then I'll turn it over to my co-author, Ben Foreman, to discuss the unique challenges that gateway cities are facing. It's important just to preface, the data that we use in this report comes from a number of different sources. We use both national data when we have more up-to-date numbers, and then we use state data. And state data tends to lag the national numbers, and data tends to lag policies. So we have a number of policies that are still ongoing. We have new policies that have just been announced, and so a lot of the data sometimes has not fully been represented here. And so therefore, my colleague Kelly Harrington, another author in the report, conducted a number of interviews in key industries to get a better sense of what is actually happening on the ground in real time. So with that. So at the outset of Trump's second term, he has made reducing immigration a key priority. His Department of Homeland Security has made an astonishing promise of deporting 1 million immigrants a year, and that amounts to about 30,000 arrests a day. And as we've all read and heard, many of these arrests have not been limited to undocumented immigrants, but they've also have included ones with legal authorization, as well as U.S. citizens in some rare cases. And it's common knowledge that immigration has been key to our prosperity in the U.S., and Massachusetts is no different. For several decades, immigrants have come, they've settled here, they've powered our textile mills, they've manned our fishing boats, and they've cared for our elderly, our sick, and our children. So 2 years ago, the Boston Indicators released a deep dive into the immigrant population in the greater Boston region. And as you can see here, greater Boston is extremely diverse. This map shows the top immigrant group across all of the different municipalities. And as you can see, 29 different immigrant groups are represented in this map alone. And while today's report will focus on the economic impact of the immigration crackdown, I think it's important that we keep in mind the human toll that a lot of these communities are facing. So as I mentioned, we'll start with the national net immigration over time. So from 2001 to 2019, we see that immigration hovered around 900,000 to 1 million. We do see that in 2024, there was a large increase in immigration, and this is likely due to a backlog during the COVID pandemic and also a number of immigration policies under the Biden administration. And then we see a somewhat regression to the mean in 2025. But the Census Bureau projects that we could actually continue on a downward trend, dipping below 300, or dipping to 321,000 in 2026. So President Trump has made his approach to immigration essentially on both sort of the ICE raids approach, but also from a bureaucratic approach. So he has announced and attached a hefty fee of $100,000 for all new H-1B visa applications for those workers who are currently living abroad. H-1B visas are important for our region in particular. They bring in high-skilled workers, workers with specialized skills. He has attacked and succeeded in some cases in withdrawing federal funding from our universities and our research centers. He has expanded his infamous travel ban to a total of now 39 countries. He's allowed the Department of Homeland Security to use social media in the vetting of applicants. And he's even attempted to make the citizenship test harder by adding additional questions. And just last week, he announced a new confusing policy where some immigrants will have to return to their home countries while they wait for a green card. So if we look at the net international migration in Massachusetts, we see a relatively similar trend to the national. So from 2010 to 2016, we see a steady increase in immigration. We do see a drop in immigration from 2017 to 2021. And again, this overlaps with the first Trump administration, but it also includes the global pandemic. And then we see a spike similar to the national trend. And this includes, again, the backlog likely from the COVID pandemic, but also a number of policy changes. And then we also regress to the mean in 2025. However, if we follow the national trend that the Census Bureau projects, we could see our net immigration rate drop to below 30,000 in 2026. Now, this is extremely troubling for our region. Our region suffers from high domestic outmigration. We have one of the lowest fertility rates in the nation, and that will impact our future labor force. And then some industries have already claimed that they have a number of labor shortages as well. So just to put this number, this 30,000, lower than 30,000 number into context, we wanted to get a sense of how many immigrants should we be welcoming into Massachusetts just to keep our labor force at its current size. And we estimate that we need at least 60,000 immigrants each year over the next 5 years. That number exactly is 64,000, and that would yield at least 29,000 workers. And this is based off of the age structure of new immigrants that come into Massachusetts and their labor force participation rates. Now, we come to this 29,000 by looking at what is the gap between those who are leaving the labor force due to retirements and those who are entering, and that gap is about 9,000 workers each year. Then we look at the 20,000 number of the domestic outmigration each year over the last couple of years, and so we arrive at this 29,000. So in reality, we really need to be welcoming new immigrants instead of deterring them. So if we go back to this net international migration for Massachusetts, you can see that before the first Trump administration, we would have probably hit that mark in 2025, and we would have exceeded it in 2026. But now we might experience a labor force contraction due to these policies. So currently we use the American Community Survey for 2024, and we find that immigrants make up about 24% of the population, the labor force population. As you can see here, though, immigrants are overrepresented in many key industries. So for example, in the construction industry, 30% are immigrants, but if you look at specific subtrades, we find that 67% of roofers in particular are immigrants. If you look at the transportation and warehousing industry, 31% are immigrants, but if you look among rail and public transit workers, 64% are foreign-born. And in the healthcare and social assistance industry, this is the largest industry. It's the fastest growing industry in the nation. We see that 25% of immigrants make up that sector, but among home health aides, 50% are immigrants. Now, if the Commonwealth, if we experience an immigration slowdown, we could risk losing billions of dollars of economic activity over the next 5 years. We estimate that the total spending power for immigrants in 2024 was over $50 billion. And on top of that, in that same year, immigrants paid $30 billion in federal, state, and local taxes. Now, we also look at the economic contribution that international students play because of the unique population we have here, and we estimate that international students contributed about $5.7 billion in 2025. Now, some have reported that we could see a reduction in our international student population. The number ranges around 30% nationally. A drop of that magnitude locally could result in the loss of $1.4 billion in economic activity. Now, this number is relatively conservative. We do consider that some institutions, highly competitive institutions, might be able to backfill some enrollment numbers, but it's common knowledge that international students on average pay more than domestic students. So as I mentioned before, my colleague interviewed 19 different industry leaders and experts in healthcare, construction, and life sciences. And across all of these interviews, the common theme was that fear and uncertainty are causing real disruptions in the day-to-day work. So in the life sciences and the knowledge economy in particular, this H-1B visa fee has created quite the sticker shock for many of these smaller companies, startup companies. And as you can see here, one industry representative put it nicely of $100,000 is a hell of a lot of money. To put that number into context, before this policy came into effect, the average amount for an H-1B visa application was about $5,000. And in our interviews, some people have already said that they plan to transfer their workers to satellite offices abroad. And this follows what the literature says. When we deny H-1B visas, companies are more likely to ship those jobs overseas rather than hire locally. And this is partly because they are making the argument that they can't find the skills that they need here. In the healthcare space in particular, nursing homes and long-term care facilities have been hit the hardest. The first wave came last summer when the Trump administration terminated the Biden-era humanitarian parole program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. And in one nursing home in particular, they mentioned that they lost about 50 workers. This included CNAs, other nurses, and kitchen staff. And then last year, the day before Thanksgiving, President Trump announced that he would not be renewing the temporary protective status for many Haitian workers. Massachusetts is home to about 37,000 TPS workers, 23,000 are Haitians. And this has caused a number of different uncertainties in each of the different facilities. So one facility, as the deadline was leading up to in February of this year, ended up hiring additional staff. Another facility refused to schedule some TPS workers for fear that they wouldn't be eligible to work after February. Now this case has continued all the way up to the Supreme Court, and we're still waiting on a decision. And so these workers are continuing to be working in a cloud of fear and uncertainty. And then lastly, in construction, we heard very similar accounts to what we've read in the news. Delays are occurring because ICE activity has increased. Now, we have not seen the same ICE activity as some other cities in the country, but ICE activity has increased locally. And mere rumors of ICE activity around construction sites can cause workers to not show up at all. And this is not just limited to those who might not have documentation, but all immigrants have decided, I'm not going to take that risk. One general contractor estimated that these delays could amount to about a 10% or more increase in the original contract amount. And another general contractor recounted a story where he had to drive several hours to pick up one of his subcontractors who was an immigrant because the subcontractor feared for driving long distances that he could get stopped by ICE. And so these stories are unfortunately becoming very commonplace. It's important that we continue to keep sharing these. So with that, I will turn it over to my co-author, Ben Foreman.
Thank you, Kim. Before I begin, I just want to take this opportunity to thank Lee Pelton. It's always such a privilege to work with the Boston Foundation and his team, but it's gotten even better, I have to say. I learned so much from working with Kelly and Kimberly and Luke on this project, and I think all of us just see the volume of great work that Boston Indicators is providing to the community and how important that research is. So thank you, Lee. And I think it's not a great analogy, but it's clear that Boston Indicators was already top-notch when Lee came, and it got even better somehow. He saw the competitive strength and built on it, and that's the way we need to think about our immigration challenge today. Without question, our ability to draw immigrants is one of our top 2 economic assets in Massachusetts. We're second in the country in drawing immigrants, trailing only one other state, which is much warmer and much lower cost than us. And I think we're making that happen because of the work you all do here, because of the support and commitment of our business community, and also because of our gateway cities, and that's what I want to talk about today, because that's my area of expertise. We're just as good as getting people who are globally talented and sought after to come here with their resources and to move to Lexington as we are at supporting people who come here with nothing and move to Lawrence or move to Lowell, and then strive both for themselves and for their children to contribute to our Commonwealth's economy and make outsized contributions. So our gateway cities today, our Lawrences, our Lowells, our Springfields, New Bedfords, Fall Rivers, the old mill cities in our Commonwealth make up about 25% of all the state's residents. But they're 40% of our foreign-born population, and if you look at data on new arrivals, they're over half of the people who've come very recently to the Commonwealth. So they are true to the name gateway cities, but I'll share with you that I was there when we came up with the term gateway cities in 2005 or 6. I was sitting in a small office at the Brookings Institution, and Mass Inc. and Brookings were partnered on this report, and we were trying to think of names to call these old mill cities. And at the time, people were calling them forgotten cities or legacy cities, and we wanted something more positive, so someone offered the idea of gateway. Well, gateway nationally is used for cities like Toronto and London and Los Angeles and New York that are true immigrant gateways, but 20 years ago, our gateway cities did not have a larger foreign-born population than the Commonwealth as a whole. They had, 100 years before that, drawn generations of immigrants to their factories, but the factories have been quiet for quite a long time, and there wasn't much economy left. So their foreign populations had decreased considerably. So over the last 20 years of my career working in gateway cities, I've seen the new arrivals come to the boarded up storefronts and bring their immigrant entrepreneurship and businesses to the downtowns of all our gateway cities and bring their culture and bring their food. When I started working on gateway cities, they had a real complex. They were stuck in the past. They didn't see a bright future. Immigrants brought their energy and their cultures, and they enlivened and made these places more vibrant. And they also got involved civically, and they formed business associations, and they worked hard on community development. Around the time when I started up working on gateway cities, the Great Recession came, and the foreclosure crisis, and like a brush fire, it burned through the neighborhoods and left behind lots of vacant and blighted properties. We're still dealing with that, but nowhere near to the extent that we once were, because immigrant families came and occupied those homes, they fixed them up, they rebuilt them, they put them back to productive use. And so our gateway cities today are former mill towns. A lot of their mills have been converted to housing. Most of our gateway cities were 20 or 30% below their population peaks. They're now at or above their historic population peaks. Part of that is reclaiming the mills and putting people in them. So what gateway cities are producing today is not any manufactured product, it's human capital. They're residential centers. They're attracting striving immigrants who are going to be our next generation of workers for the Commonwealth. And if you want to see this, go to Early College Day at the State House, because it's like the United Nations, and you see these kids from gateway cities all across the Commonwealth who are still learning to speak English, but they're also learning about higher education and their pathways to the jobs in our future economy. And a lot of them are figuring out ways to get lots of education, and by the time they graduate high school, they've got an associate's degree and a career plan. And so not only are they a disproportionate share of our future workforce, but they're accelerating their path into the future workforce. When we look at the population in gateway cities, ages 6 to 17, so this is the cohort that's going to take out the last of our baby boom generation in the workforce, those entering in the next 10 years. Since 2010, we've seen the share of the population who are either foreign-born themselves or have a parent who's foreign-born increase dramatically in all the gateway cities, 10 to 20 or even more percentage point growth in the last decade or so. Our future workforce is clearly being minted and prepared by these communities disproportionately, and it's really important to think about the health of them. And there are some concerns that they've received so many immigrants all at once that they're struggling to incorporate them. And that may be reflected in rapidly rising housing costs. It may be struggling to educate large numbers of English language learners when we haven't had historically that many English language learner students. In Massachusetts has been challenged with its bilingual education policy. We're just getting it together, we all know. And then, of course, there's questions if you have a shock in labor supply, does that depress wages for native-born workers? We wonder and worry about these things in part because of some of the voting patterns we saw in 2024. Fall River, for example, voted for the Republican candidate for the first time in 100 years. So maybe there are some challenges that we need to work harder on in the short term to make sure that these communities can continue to do their jobs. When you look at the literature, there certainly is evidence that immigrants can increase housing prices in the short term. On the school performance question, it's much less decided. There's actually a substantial evidence that communities that have had low shares of English language learner students, when they gain more, they get better at educating them, and overall performance rises in the system. On the labor market side, it's a hotly debated issue. Certainly there could be short-term suppression of wages, but we also have to understand that it's not just a supply shock. When we have more people, demand rises as well, so there's a new equilibrium, and usually that economic growth means the new equilibrium is higher income for everybody, at least in the long term. So, we took a look at the data on our gateway cities. We're particularly interested in the housing question because we spend a lot of time looking at the rapid increases in gateway city home prices. And when you look at that, there's very little to no correlation between the share of new immigrants to each of the gateway cities and the changes in their housing prices. I mean, take a look at Springfield. The housing values have increased in Springfield by 80% over the last 10 years. The same amount as Revere. Springfield's seen very little increase in its foreign population. Revere's seen a 50% increase. So it certainly could be having some effect on prices, but it's much more the energy costs, the interest rates, the rising incomes, and all the other things that contribute to housing costs, and very little the share of foreign-born that's driving the very real challenges that gateway city residents are experiencing in housing markets. When we look at school performance and the changes in the share of foreign-born students in each school and the school's performance on the MCAS, there's absolutely zero correlation there. And I think that really speaks well to what we do as a Commonwealth. We've significantly increased the support we give to school districts for English language learners. We've also provided funds to schools that have seen unpredictable influxes due to things like Hurricane Maria. So we've really resourced the schools to be able to do their job so that we're benefiting from the new energy and cultures and everything that immigrant students bring and are able to make sure that it comes at no cost to the incumbent students. And lastly, earnings. When we look at earnings, there's no correlation, again, between the share foreign-born and the earnings, particularly when we look at the lower skilled segment of workers, those with a high school degree or less. That's where most of the concern in the literature is, and we're not seeing adverse effects there for gateway cities in Massachusetts. So looking at all that, I think we're reassured, but that doesn't mean we don't have a lot of work to do to continue to make sure that our gateway cities are welcoming communities, particularly given the challenges that they face today. We need to make sure that we're doing all that we can to protect these immigrant communities. We did some work a few years back with Luke and the team on public safety in Massachusetts post-criminal justice reform. We saw dramatic declines in crime, along with dramatic decreases in incarceration. That's not true across the board. A few gateway cities have seen public safety issues, and to the extent that people are afraid to call for support, that could really have destabilizing effects. At a time when we have fewer resources, less fiscal capacity, making sure we continue to have the resources to support English language learners and our crime prevention and public safety budgets in these communities is really important. Our small businesses are under more stress now than they've ever been. They've lost considerable market in some places where people have left these communities out of fear or being taken out. We need to do all that we can to make sure that we aren't seeing shops close. And lastly, doubling down on our work to improve our ESOL system. Again, we've done some work on that recently and showed that the state is far behind and making sure that that system is doing what it needs to do for a state that is competing on its ability to bring immigrants and incorporate them into our economy. And while we may not have the numbers we've had in recent years, this year, we can still do far more to train and support the immigrants we have with the resources we have available today. And I know there's many people in this room doing that good work. So that's all I have, and I am very grateful to Eva for all the work and experience and knowledge that she brings to this conversation. And I turn it over to her now to lead the panel.
And Kimberly, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning. That's better. First, please allow me to express my gratitude to the Boston Foundation for bringing us together, and take a moment to also acknowledge, Lee, I didn't know this was your last public event, and I just wanted to say thank you and express my gratitude for your outstanding leadership. I mean, this is a remarkable institution, and this is not the first and the last time that we talk about the most pressing issues and having this conversation. So thank you for the privilege to be with you today and to be part of this discussion. I am delighted to invite to the stage two amazing leaders from our business community. My dear friend and partner in crime, Tom O'Brien. He is the founding partner and CEO of HYM Investment, and he's also the co-chair of the Massachusetts Business Coalition, focusing on economic security and workforce security. So Tom, please come to the stage. And our other brilliant leader, Tara Gregorio, the president and CEO of Mass Senior Care Association.
Hey, Tara.
Please.
Thanks, everybody.
And a big thank you to Keith Mahoney for organizing this, to you and your team for your vision and your work. Thank you so very much. So before I turn to our fabulous panelists, allow me to say a few things and a few points to really frame the discussion. We heard the report. The statistics are frightening, and the future of workforce is really at risk. And I also wanted to point out that concerns about border security, the larger scale of migrants coming to this country, has really consumed the US debate about immigration. Successive successive administrations have responded with dramatic policies in addressing enforcement tactics. And in the process, immigration has become a top-tier political issue that has decided the election outcomes and has animated deep divides in the political life of our country. And what we are missing, and I think what the country is missing at this time, is the debate about the future of immigration workforce and how does immigration policy plays a major role in our economic security and workforce security. We as a country have achieved bringing border security as a national priority item, but we have failed to bring the future of the workforce and the role that immigration can and should play for the future growth of our country. So I wanted to invite you all, we're going to start with the panel, then turn into the audience. And I see amazing brain power and leaders in this room to really think together. We know what the reality is. This is not an old problem. Our system needs to be updated and upgraded and modernized. The last time that Congress really looked into and upgraded immigration policies was in 1990, before internet and artificial intelligence. So as we have this discussion today in this extremely important topic for the future, I invite the panelists and I invite all of you when we get to the Q&A session to think about, with a solution-oriented lens, think about what's the role of immigration and what this role in the systems can be in the future, and where can we find the openings to really design a system that responds to our economy, responds to the times that we are living in. So with no focus on political blame, I think the whole debate of failed policies in the past and what has happened or should have happened, I think those are delaying the important conversations that we need to have about immigration and workforce. So with that, I will turn the floor to Tara, when you can start with you. We heard the report, and I wanted you to react, reflect as a business leader in the healthcare industry. Where do you see the impact, and how are you adapting to this, to this time situation?
Well, thank you. And thank you to the Boston Foundation for convening us all to have this really important discussion, which hopefully will serve as a launching point for many more. And thank you to both of you for leading us in the business community and with the governor for her outstanding work and really, I think, prioritizing this issue from an economic perspective. So let me start by saying Mass Senior Care, we work with older adults in ensuring that they have access to quality care throughout the continuum, wherever they are in their stage of care, whether it's at home, at an assisted living or nursing facility care. And I'm going to share a story about who these caregivers are. We heard Kimberly say that 50% are immigrants, which is true. And I've had a chance to work with many of them. And most recently, well, actually, I was at the State House advocating for a piece of legislation with about 10 CNAs, and it was quality jobs. So the mission was to raise wages to a living wage, to create pathways and culture. And so we were well scripted to go in and advocate for wage increases. We get in there, and what these individuals wanted to talk about was, what can I do for my residents and consumers? It wasn't about them. It was about their residents and the people that they care for. I say that to say that now, after years of going in and out of nursing facilities and assisted living, one thing reigns true for me, that these are mission-driven individuals that care passionately about the work that they do. They go in on days off to hold the hand of a dying resident. They go in on a birthday on their day off because they know a family member won't be there. So these are the individuals that we're talking about when we hear the data and who's caring and who our workforce are. And so yes, we depend on immigrants. We have, we will, and we need to, because the demographics are such that as we think about the explosive older population, right, that's the fastest growing demographic in the Commonwealth, we need people to take care of them. Right now, we have 4 working adults for every 75-year-old. In 10 years, that will decline. And you heard the numbers. I'd love to talk to Kimberly about redoing our numbers because it'll decline to 3 working adults for every 75-year-old. So how can immigration not be part of the solution as it is today? Economically speaking, we already know we have been impacted, and you heard Kimberly speak about the elimination of the humanitarian parole. We know that we're asking our clinicians to work overtime as a result of the loss of those workers. We know that 1 in 6 nursing facilities are closing to admissions with their hospital partners because they don't have the workforce. We know that there are longer wait times for families to access community-based services. And what this means for you or us as consumers, backups in the emergency department, backups in the hospital, failure to have care, more stresses on informal family caregivers because we can't access care. And from the dollar and cents, overtime costs money. Longer hospital stays cost additional money. So it is all to say that the impact is enormous, whether it's from a values perspective or also just a care and dollars perspective.
Thank you. Tom, we'll go to you next.
Sure. Well, good morning, everybody. And just if I could add my voice to thank you very much, Lee. It's I too did not know that this would be your last public event, so I hate to mark it one more time, but I just honestly did want to say thank you very much. We, as I said, I think last week publicly, we hope that you're not going too far. We need you, and we need more leaders like you. So thank you, Lee. And I would say too, just thank you very much to the folks who make up the Boston Foundation. This room is we've all gathered here on a lot of different topics in the past, and this room is a really wonderful space. It's a safe space. It's kind of a sacred space in some respects, given the topics that we talk about. And today is kind of one of those topics. Ava suggested maybe I give a little sort of personal spin to this from my perspective in the beginning. I'm drawn to this issue in part because for my wife and I, my wife Tricia and I, our path to build a family was through the path of adoption. And so we are the parents of 5 children who were born outside of the United States of America. They're now naturalized citizens. They're now older adults. We lost one child, so one is in heaven. But I'm looking around the room. My son Tomas said he might be here. They actually gave me his name tag. I have his name instead. And some of you may know Tomas. He's the executive director of the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus. So I was proudly going to introduce him, but he maybe is off on something else at the State House. So for us, it's kind of a personal piece to this. I would just add, too, though, for my wife and I, a lot of this is driven by our faith. For many of us, I think, in this room, we see the cruelty and the unkindness and sort of how that sort of becomes associated now suddenly with our government, and that destroys our credibility in the world. It destroys our ability to attract people. It affects our competitive advantage that we've had historically in the country. So that too, sort of drives us, I think, and for us in particular, that's driven by the Gospels and the call to be kind to others constantly. But I would also say too, for me, I'm also drawn. Former First Lady Michelle Obama is famous for saying, "Well, if you don't like the way things are, do something." And I think all of us are here today because we sort of agreed to that maxim and we follow that. Ava, just to kind of further describe our activity together, Ava and I Ava was previously the lead person at MIRA here for a long period of time before she went into work for the Biden administration. While she was at MIRA during the first Trump administration, we sort of got together and we looked at one another and said, let's see if we can form a business council to find solutions. Can we find practical solutions to some of these issues that drive so much emotion in all of us? Can we find a path? And just one example, if I could, on the results of that, we, after gathering a group of business leaders together and a coalition that included educators, leaders of labor, and a variety of other folks, civic leaders, political leaders in Greater Boston, one of the things we identified, this was a state issue, but one of the things we identified was there are people for whom their immigration status is not yet complete, but these are people who are working every day, paying taxes, as Ben suggested, as Kimberly suggested. They're spending a lot of money, and as Lee suggested, they're spending a lot of money, and they're going back and forth to work every day, driving, oftentimes driving without a driver's license. So therefore that means that they're not insured. And so we formed a coalition of people to work on the establishment of a driver's license for immigrants in this country whose status is not yet complete. And that coalition included companies that you would recognize, Liberty Mutual, all the companies that provide automobile insurance. It included labor, it included certainly government folks. And that passed, it actually passed over the veto of a governor. We had to achieve a veto-proof majority to get that passed and implemented in the Commonwealth, and I think that's been a huge success. There's a variety of other things that we've tried to address on the federal level as well, but that's just one example that I think people would recognize. And I think part of our hope, our purpose here today is to engage in that discussion with you. This is a room filled with friends. I'm looking at a lot of very familiar faces here, and I think we're restarting that group, that business council. We met approximately a week or two ago with the governor to kind of think that through. I would say one more thing, which is the theme of that meeting, which was really interesting for us, was many of the business leaders started the beginning of this second Trump administration sort of worried and thinking that their best strategy would be to keep their heads down and do the best they could to not attract attention to themselves or to their company. And I think almost all of them, to a person, said to us in that meeting, that's not possible anymore. Given the status of where things are and what's happening and the crisis level that Ben and Kimberly just presented, particularly for us here in Massachusetts, we all need to take action. We all need to do something, as Mrs. Obama said. So that's partly what drives us. And I would encourage everybody to kind of be part of this broad-based coalition and help us think these things through. Ava.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Tara. So we heard, the challenges and what those challenges mean for the healthcare industry, construction industry, manufacturing, and all. And the business community has a major, major role to play. And as I said in the beginning, what can we do and what are some of the options, opportunities, recommendations to really design policies and systems that support the future of our workforce? So I'll go back to our panel and say, given the work that the business community has been doing, given the fact that Massachusetts has been a leader in the country and being a laboratory of great ideas on workforce, on healthcare and education, immigration. I recall a few years ago when Deval Patrick was here in the Boston Foundation, he announced a state plan, the New Americans Agenda, which became a national model under the Obama administration with a very focus on connecting economic integration to immigration and using immigration as an engine to support our economy and looking into immigrants and refugees and the foreign-born, foreign-trained workers, generally speaking, as part of the solution, not as part of the problem. So here we are again, faced with the challenges, the threats of the workforce. So what can the business community do? The conversation has started, but if you can speak from the perspective of your industries in healthcare, construction, and others, what can the business community do? What are your priorities as next steps, given what we are facing? The immigration policies and the threats, but also in terms of the aging population and the low birth rates and the demographic pressure. So I invite your thoughts.
You go first. You're in the order.
Sure, I will. Because I am very much a solutions-driven person, right? That's what we want, and so much of this is part of a federal discussion. And what I try to do, because I am lucky to have friends and colleagues across the country in different sort of positions, and so that's one area in which we're always advocating, talking about workforce and how we will meet the demands of those that we care about, and so on. So certainly sharing and having fact-based discussions is where I begin, as well as making our resource and experience available by being here this morning and prioritizing these discussions, supporting our leaders in really making sure that we find solutions. You know, from a very micro level, we are also very engaged in helping to find and support and fund paths to citizenship as soon as we can for our TPS workers. It's something that we are very grateful to our partners. Again, many are in the audience in helping us to make sure that our workers have legal representation. And so I think it is really staying in close touch and supporting where we can. So when Senator Warren calls and says, Tara, can you share your data and experience? Well, I'm happy to. I don't want to go in the hole and duck. We want to stand up because it's essential to our economy. It's essential to the work that we do and to our workforce. It matters when we stand up. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I would just reflect on the report that that Kimberly and Ben put together. There's 3 categories in the report if people have looked at it. One is kind of the healthcare and research component. The second is kind of the long-term care piece. And then the third is construction. I've just kind of a couple of quick thoughts on each one. I'll take construction first. You know, for us in the construction business, housing, as we all know, is a huge priority for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, huge priority for the governor and lieutenant governor, huge priority for Mayor Wu. We need to build more housing. In our business, what people should just think about when you think about housing, the key to building housing is to be tremendously efficient in the construction of the housing. So if you go into an apartment building, you'll note that all of the bathrooms are stacked on top of one another. All of the hallways, everything are stacked on top of one another. So you can make all of the electrical, plumbing, all those sorts of things work appropriately. That efficiency sort of is demanded through the whole process of constructing buildings and trying to think that through. You can be a little bit more creative and interesting around commercial projects, office buildings or big life science buildings, but residential buildings have to be right on, because the key to a residential project is we're going out and we're trying to find capital from usually a pension fund or somebody, and they'll demand a specific return, and either you hit that return or you don't. And so costs are everything. And there's a population of people that have developed that expertise who build housing on a regular basis, and we're losing that group. There's a substantial portion, as Ben and Kimberly pointed out, there's a substantial portion of that group, particularly in specialty trades. The carpenters, I saw on the list of people who signed up, Mark Ehrlich signed up. I don't see Mark in the room, but Mark really was part of a leadership group that started 25 or so years ago, particularly with the carpenters, to begin to recruit and train and keep more women, more people of color in the building trades. The carpenters have been a lead on that for a long time. And that group of people specializes, Kimberly I think mentioned roofers and other pieces. So those specialty trades are important. That adds more costs and makes it harder to build housing. We need those people. On the healthcare and research piece, as people would expect, one of the people who was present, actually maybe I can't say names, I don't think of present, right? We're trying to make a safe space for everybody, but the leader of a large healthcare institution that people would all recognize was there. And this person looked at us and walked through a number of statistics that I think many of us would find surprising in terms of the number of people who are affected by TPS to all the way to the most senior scientists. I will tell you, in apartment projects that we've completed, we see a fall off in demand that we believe is completely related to the fact that fewer graduate students are coming here to Boston from overseas. We can see it right now. My suspicion is that there's a lag. This might be a another project for the Indicators Project. But there's a lag, I think, in the reporting among higher ed institutions, and maybe there's a reluctance among higher ed institutions to report this, but there's a lag in accounting for the fact that foreign-born, particularly graduate students, have dropped off dramatically, we think. That's affecting everybody, and it affects all these different institutions. So for example, if you go to one of the life science companies here and say, how's it going from a research perspective, they would immediately say to you, well, we're dependent on these federal dollars for this contract, and some of that, again, would be unexpected. So if you, without mentioning names, but if you think about some of the most recognizable pharmaceutical names that are now in Boston, and you say, okay, how are you affected by this? Almost every one of them has a federal contract, and if they speak up or do anything, they're affected by that. How do we work together to be the group that can help them address the H-1B1 visa problem, which we talked about? How do we help them turn ourselves? Boston, I would suggest, is kind of uniquely positioned. Maybe we're going to sound like too much a confident Bostonian, but maybe we're uniquely positioned compared to the rest of the country, where if we start to solve these issues, and hopefully this period ends in 2028, maybe we here in Boston can, at an earlier stage for others than other cities in the country, say, hey, we've always been welcoming to you. Please send us again your smart folks, your researchers. Please come to Boston. It's a safe space for you to be. That's one other piece, and then certainly on the long-term care, I was saying to Tara, as we said hello this morning, I was yesterday at the Boston Home, which people may know is a very beautiful building on the corner of Gallivan Boulevard and Dorchester Avenue here in Boston. You've probably driven by it a million times. You've never been in it, I would suspect. They care for multiple sclerosis people. They have 100 beds, and the population, they probably have, I think they have 10 or so workers per person, so it's a very expensive population to manage. But they have a huge group of TPS, many people who've been here since the Haitian earthquake in 2011 or 12, and that group is deeply affected. So there's categories of TPS is a court case, and so there are paths here for us to sign on to the governor and to the attorney general's arguments on those. There's a path maybe on H-1B1 where we can perhaps be transactional and find our way to that. There's a path, I think, on a variety of other these federal issues, and the key is for all of us to work together as a coalition to make these things work. Strength in numbers is the key.
Thank you, Tom. And you hit some really important points of, the coming together, the togetherness, the solution-oriented approach. And I said in the beginning that, the debate has been very much about border security, and that has consumed the debate on U.S., immigration. But what can we do to really build a narrative that we need solutions and find common grounds for an immigration system that it's modernized to respond to the needs of our economy? And I think the narrative piece is super important. If you look at the polling, the American public supports legal immigration and a system that is smart and support the country. But they, don't appreciate the, the pictures and the views and the future flows conversations. So how can we work together and formulate a strategy that would lead to a strong narrative that calls for solutions, calls for transactional, practical, smart solution, that having an immigration system that responds to the future of the workforce, it's not just the right thing to do, but it's a smart thing to do. So I'll invite our panel to comment on that. How can we build a narrative and bring the conversation that is missing against the backdrop of all about, security? And yes, that's important. That, the border is a very different place. But what can we do for the economic security and the workforce security?
So I think, obviously I began with a story, so I do think storytelling is really important to share our experiences, and hopefully dispel what we do see on nightly news or Twitter, X, or whatever it's called now. But I also think that data does matter, and I think about this report as being a really important springboard to further discussion that both embodies, again, the the stories, but also the economic reality. And when I hear Tom saying that we're seeing a slowdown in construction because, when I'm telling you that we are seeing a denial of services because, these are the ramifications that directly impact us families and the citizens of our nation and the Commonwealth. I also think that as business people become more engaged in looking at the dollars and cents of business and they feel it in their pocketbooks, I do think that there'll be even more opportunity to galvanize more loudly some of the business community, and I do believe we're seeing that also. So I'm super optimistic about the opportunity to be able to lay out that fact-based discussion, and we just need to promote it in the way that we are here today. And I shared that story earlier about the CNAs at the State House because I believe one of my ethos is that people tell us who they are whenever we meet them. They tell us not by their words, but by their actions. And so I learned from those CNAs that what was most important to them were their residents, not their wages, because they are mission-driven people. I've learned an awful lot about Tom today and about his mission and purpose. And so the more that we can be out there showing and telling what matters to us, I think is critically important.
Yeah, the stories are powerful, and they do add the human face to
Yes.
the realities that we are all facing.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I think you said the word, which is optimism, right? We have to choose to be optimistic, I think, and some days are really hard, I think, to do that. But I was just sitting here thinking as you were talking, Tara, there's a book, and I apologize, I forget, he's one of the speechwriters, I'm sorry to go back to the Obama administration, but one of the speechwriters for the Obama administration. Yeah, Ben Rhodes, thank you, about speeches. And I haven't completed it, but I've read like the first third of it. It's awesome, by the way, if folks could pick this up. And you may remind me of the title too, by the way, I forget. What We Say or something like that, yeah. So, but the fundamental part of the book is about the argument or the conversation of what it means to be an American and who we all are as Americans. And I think you reflect on that and say, well, this is a conversation that's been happening for 250 years. Aren't we all Americans? If you've been here for one day versus you've been here for 7 generations, we're all Americans, 100%. And it is also true that we could move and live in Germany, but we'll never become German. But the beauty of this country is people can move from someplace else and can become American, which is our competitive advantage. And so to me, I think, Ava, the key to what you teed up in a question is, if we're going to have a conversation that will draw people together to begin to take collective action, it's built, I think, around jobs and job security. That to me is the space where we can all try to find some common ground. And jobs and job security is built around how do we as a nation, as a city, as a community, how do we grow? How do we find the path forward? And the way we find our path forward is the advantage that we've had for hundreds of years here, which is people wake up around the world and they don't say, Jerry and I were just saying this, they don't say to one another, take me to Russia. I'm sorry if there are folks who are from Russia here, or to take me to some other country. They say, take me to the United States of America. I'm a hardworking person. I want to create a better life for my family, or I have an idea that I want to pursue, or I don't know what I want to do. I just want to be in a safer space. Maybe that's not always the case these days, but that's the competitive advantage that we've always had. So that's part of this effort of the Business Council that Ava has been such a great visionary in helping us pull together of, okay, we can all talk about job security. We can all try to think this through. And the competitive advantage for all of us has been, we're an attractive place for people to want to come to raise a family here, to pursue their career, to try and find a better path for their family. And that's our path. If you want to be a pro-business administration, you need to be predictable and you need to be about job security. That is a discussion I think we can all share.
Thank you so much, Tom and Tara, and thank you for your leadership as well. I think the business community has a huge, huge role to play. There are many states, and through the National Governors Association, I think conversations about solutions, that needs to be the focus. Political blaming, it's delaying what needs to happen. And I think we should, with the forward-looking lens, to see what openings are at the federal level as well, with the Business Roundtable. The Business Roundtable in Massachusetts has been amazing, but also the National Business Table with leaders who have access to the White House and understand but are not speaking up to what the needs are and what system do we need to modernize our completely outdated immigration system. So with that, I want to thank our panel and turn it over to the audience, and happy to take your comments, your reaction, your questions. Yes, Adam.
First of all, I love your kind of solutions-oriented framing. I loved your solution-oriented framing, Ava. I think that's really, really important. And so towards that end, as I heard the recommendations, and it's my ear, right? So this is what I heard. I heard that schools are one of the key pillars here. But then the focus becomes doubling down on ESOL, which is really, really important. But I wonder, is that a future-oriented lens? How do we really take advantage of thinking about schools as centers of dynamic communities and thinking about the broader civic roles that they play? So what would it take, I think, to get community leaders, NGOs, philanthropists to reimagine the role that schools actually should be playing in our civic life?
Yeah, I know that you have, and welcome to whoever wants to take the question. I only quickly respond. You have done that work, reimagining immigration. So I think getting that conversation and inviting the best minds to think how the schools and education institutions can become part of the solution and part of building that narrative from early on. And I invite our panelists to respond as well.
I completely agree. Sorry, I know. I know. This room, it's famous or infamous for the pillars, right? I'm thinking of like one particular example is, people may think about the life science industry and say to themselves, wow, the life science industry is driven by people who are typically PhDs from MIT or wherever. Actually, the truth is it's driven by people who have certificates, who are lab technicians, and these are great jobs. And so there's a great pathway for people who have graduated from high school, perhaps have not completed college, but have a certificate and do that work. They put a lab coat on, they go to work every day, and the industry is dependent on their accuracy, their hard work, and imagination, and all those sorts of things. So that definitely, I think, is kind of getting to where schools are. I think of Revere, Kimberly and Ben presented all the gateway cities. We do a lot of work in Revere. They're building a new high school in Revere. They've tried, I think, to think carefully about those sorts of jobs and how do we connect people specifically to jobs. Same is true with construction and all those different industries as well.
And just quickly, in Revere, one of the things they did is they built this beautiful welcoming club where kids, older newcomers, are actually leading younger newcomers
And
throughout
working.
the whole schools.
Yeah.
That's opening up an imagination.
We should mention Mayor Keefe of Revere, who's a really wonderful person, and Revere is a city that is deeply, deeply proud, multi-generational proud of their school system and the work that they've done. So, sorry, Tara.
I'll just add, I think it's a phenomenal idea, and we need the leadership and innovation and the willingness to engage. And I love Ben's picture. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, and what he showed up at the State House with that diversity was just so hopeful and beautiful, and that's our future, frankly. So I don't have anything except to say thank you for your leadership.
We'll go here, and then Ivan will come to you, and Cindy will come to you next.
Thank you. I'm Grace Moreno. I'm the executive director of Unidos in Power. The thing I want to be a part of the solution, and that's what Massachusetts has always been around LGBT, around everything, right? We are in a different environment, right? We are in a bully president environment. So any amount of logic that's been presented or arguments that have been shown fall short of the bullying phenomena, right? And then, as bullies do, right, you've got the big industries, Apple and Tesla and all of the others behind them, so that even good logic and good arguments and good examples, and you see the felt fall through to a bullying and administration. And I have seen my good friend Yvonne, use the other side of what I feel we have left, which is the Constitution and the law, right? Even though it gets ignored and passed on. We have yet. How can we, as a community of leaders and as a leader in this industry in Massachusetts, in this forward way of thinking, in the solutions we brought, how can we use both the logic and the intellectual properties that we have from the vast amount of intelligence that lives here, and also the arm of legal power? I know our Attorney General has done it. Our governor is a litigator. She's done it. How can we, as a business community, also, which is where the power is, get behind a legal approach to this? Because $100,000 for an HB1 visa is not a solution, and it is not American, right? But that is where I get a little bit like, what can we do as a people to not only just present what is obvious, because that's not going to work, but put pressure in the only way that this administration might be able to be handled. Mm-hmm. So I ask another question, not a solution to it. I'm hoping that when I pass this mic over to Ivan, he will have that solution. But that's my contribution.
Well, that's an excellent question. And speaking of Ivan, I just wanted to give him a shout out because litigation has been a powerful tool, and probably the reason why the report didn't have all the scary numbers is because litigation has been amazing. And Ivan, thank you for your leadership and the work that you have done, because there was a stop in TPS and other wins, protecting the Constitution and protecting the law. So that has been one tool, and then I'll let our colleagues here respond to the rest of the question before we go to Ivan.
Ivan, do you want to go, or do you want us? Or do you want us to go?
Ivan, why don't you go, and then we'll answer, both questions.
Well, thank you, and thank you for this wonderful panel and an excellent report. What I've been thinking about is how do we use this, and I love the way that Tara mentioned, use this report as a springboard, right? How do we use this report as a springboard to activate the business community? And I'm thinking very broadly, employers who have TPS folks in their payroll, the chambers of commerce and those type of entities and networks, like to keep activating them so that they see that they too have a dog in this fight. And I think the report is a wonderful springboard for that, but I'm wondering if there are other ideas that the distinguished panelists have for getting us to continue that momentum and keep pushing for that so that those stakeholders also speak up. And it's not just some of the folks in the room who are the usual messengers and the usual folks who are talking about the issues.
So I love that question. I'm somebody who also believes in transparency and accountability. And so holding us, the business community, accountable to a solutions-driven model. I hate to put it back on my colleagues here on the stage, but the work that they are doing by convening with the support of the governor's office to convene business leaders to have that discussion about what does it take, what do we need. And I often feel in a variety of I'm one small person in a bunch of big issues, and where we lack leadership. But when we have strong, committed leaders, I think it gets back to your point. It is a multi-prong approach, right? It's absolutely going hard on legal, as well as public policy, as well as messaging and advocacy. It's all of those things. But we need the leadership that is now certainly here, has been, but really engaging us as business community members and holding us accountable. That's what I think we
and
need.
speaking up, not just speaking
Yes.
in close
That's part of accountability.
setting,
Yeah,
but
agree.
speaking up as to what this means for their workforce, what that means for the businesses, for the areas that these businesses operate. And it's not about blaming, it's not about bullying, it's about speaking the truth. We all share the love for the country. We have different views of how immigration system should function, but the common grounds that this is about the future growth of our state or our country, that should be the guiding principle of the narrative and the conversation.
Can I add one quick thing? Just,
sure.
so first of all, Yvonne, thank you very much for being here, and great question. I think, could I just add, so when we did this meeting, we had a convening session. The governor sort of hosted us. we agreed in that session that we kind of make sure that everybody was sort of protected, and so I can't really speak about. But I would say the theme is everybody showed up. Like, all of the leaders that you would recognize was there. One interesting dynamic, I think, is you definitely got a sense from the governor how hard she's been working, and maybe sometimes she might feel a little alone and frustrated, right? And so there was a little bit of that. For example, people raised TPS and sort of said, hey, we have to protect our workers. We have to, and she was sort of pretty quick to say, hey, why don't you sign on to the briefs that we've provided, right? So that was one key piece. And I think that kind of put people on notice to say, hey, listen, step up. But I think, too, the other theme, just to be fair for everybody in that room, I think people legitimately in 2025 said to themselves, what's the smart thing for my business? And there was a huge sense of kind of shock and I'm responsible for running this, and by the way, huge nonprofits, huge healthcare nonprofits were in that room. I am responsible for running this business. I would love to speak up, but the smart thing for me in 25 was keep my head low, trying to argue for, the grants that you think are Harvard grants are not Harvard grants. They're research grants that are associated with this hospital, and I got to win that argument, so I got to keep my head low to win that. And that means I have to have conversations with these people. As much as I might feel like I have to take a shower afterwards, I got to have conversations with these people. And so there was some of that. But now I think the theme, too, to your point, is people are kind of looking at us and saying, okay, we survived 25, but now we've got 3 more years to go, 2.5 years to go, or whatever, wherever we are. And we have to now start to find solutions. How do we stand up? And I think everybody is aware that this is a pretty transactional administration. They're interested in, self-enrichment, in some respects. How do you think about that kind of stuff? How do we protect the people we care about? How do we protect our city? How do we protect our region? How do we find the path? What's our agenda for that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Cindy had her hands up, and then we'll go back to you.
Hi, thank you. Cindy Rowe from JALSA, and I work with several organizations, JFS Online and JVS, who's in the room, who are now thinking about all of the immigrants who are here and have been trained and are still in their first jobs that they got maybe even years and years ago. So the opportunity to upskill the workers who first came here and were trained into jobs that are now open where we are going to need a larger workforce. While wondering if there is opportunity for some kind of public-private partnership where we are looking at where immigrants are now, hundreds of thousands of immigrants now in our workforce, and thinking about ways to upskill those workers as well.
Excellent question, because we're talking about the future of the workforce, and then we, 1 out of 5 workers here in Massachusetts being foreign-born. And I'm happy to say that also Eastern Bank Foundation has been, and working with, the administration, announced a public and private partnership that my colleague Jerry Rubin and I are leading for the foundation, creating the Career Focused English Proficiency initiative that really focuses on the work English, giving the workers the skills that they need to advance their opportunities in their careers. I'm happy to say that we are launching a pilot in Brockton and in the North Shore. The state of Massachusetts also had put $10 million, so I want to commend the administration as well. The Boston Foundation, it's a huge player with the Mass Skills Coalition and the resources and their vision into this. So yes, there are public and private partnerships. There is a huge effort to really advance that and bring more resources into the vocational English and the skills. And we're also, the Eastern Bank Foundation, Boston Foundation, and other leaders working with the ComCore Corporation will soon launch the New England Hub center, a resource center that will share the best practices on vocational English, licensing, and credentialing. So those are important conversations. There are great starts and illustration of what business, philanthropy, and community can do together to really advance the opportunities for the foreign-born, foreign and foreign trained workforce.
Thanks,
I
Cindy.
think we are at time, but I'll let the panel have the last
No, I
word.
was just going to say thank you to Cindy. Cindy was one of our early, members who we all try to get together and trying to think about good trouble together. So thank you, Cindy, for being here. Well, good.
Thank you, Cindy, for your advocacy. At JVS too, I see our JVS Emmys, and they have done amazing work as one of the largest workforce agencies in the country. So thank you for your leadership as well. Any last words before we wrap up?
Just, I think we all have to be optimistic. We all have to work together. We have to build a coalition. We have to lean on one another, and looking forward to next steps.
Just would add my gratitude again to the Boston Foundation and our great researchers and all of you for showing up and being part of this discussion and ongoing engagement. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. Each and every one of you. Thank you, Lee, again, and the Boston Foundation for getting us together. I want to leave you with one last thought, that regardless how hard and challenging things may be, and there are no easy answers, but there are easy partnerships, collaboration for all of us to be a very solution-oriented state, and I am a prisoner of hope. I think that this is a detour that's happening. It's not a fundamental change of who we are as a nation. America 250, it's another illustration what this country has done in amazing ways and will continue to do. So keep up the good work, stay connected, stay engaged. You'll hear more from all of us, and the future is brighter than we think.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.